The first day that, so I went for the business foundations course. So I kind of ended up at INSEAD a little bit earlier, which was December. I land in this place in the middle of the forest where nobody speaks English. Uh, but they baked good food. I mean, they were good desserts and there was good bread. And I was like, okay, I can live with this.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of Roll Call, where we help you answer your questions on all things MBA, career, and life. So let us know what's your question.
If there is one industry that has gained the most buzz this year, it has got to be healthcare. Now more than ever, are we realizing the importance of optimizing healthcare solutions and using technology to enable the change? Hence, it is with great pride that we welcome our guest today.
Our guest has built 7 years of experience in the healthcare sector, spanning across India, the UK, and the US. In his current role at Microsoft, he's a front runner for the company's notable initiative, AI for Health. In fact, only a few days ago, he and his team launched the pivotal Microsoft Premonition.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet Siddhartha Chaturvedi. Sid, it's a pleasure to have you on Roll Call today.
Well, thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Sid, we'll jump right into the questions for you because we have a lot of those questions. Your work experience has largely been in the healthcare sector. In fact, the journey began with a startup you launched in 2013. Could you tell us more about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, my experience in healthcare started by being born because I was born in a family of doctors. So in India, if you're born in a family of doctors, you're supposed to become a doctor. And when I did take up computer science, my dad was slightly upset but supportive. Like, it's something that I do give him. He didn't push me to take medicine. But of course, that sort of tingling feeling in the back remains, where you want to give back to some industry where you kind of have seen it all around you. So after doing some basic machine learning stuff for technology consulting, I was primarily working in the financial sector at that point of time. I tried to use the same kind of learnings into the health sector. That's when I started Tathastu, which was my social impact initiative back in India to do predictive analytics for disease patterns. And that was quite a journey. The highs were getting onto national television on ET Now in India, getting selected at the MIT bootcamp as one of the 50 global startups for their global entrepreneurship bootcamp. And the lows were being questioned to like, how do you monetize this? How do you make money out of this? And the avenues that were there were all around e-commerce, and potentially one of the most challenging ones was selling the trends to drug sales companies and allowing people to fall ill without intervening so as to boost sales. So that was a difficult choice to make, but it ended up with me shutting down the startup and applying for an MBA, which I thankfully got, and moved to INSEAD.
So, Sid, so you already had a startup, and then you said that you then decided to join INSEAD. So, what made you apply for business school, and why specifically INSEAD?
It's a fascinating question because I kind of understood technology, but I did not understand business as well as I thought I would. There's a few things that play on your mind when you're running a startup. The first one is I want to get a skill set that allows me to better understand how do I do all these business valuations, how do I look at term sheets, how do I understand financial cash flows. And to that end, it was I could do either an MBA or a master's in finance, or I could also sit down on YouTube and spend a lot of time there. But the other thing was getting that network, because I'd seen all these alumni groups really pull each other up and help each other out in difficult times. So I did want a school that did have a strong alumni group, that did have a strong brand name, and that was something that was playing on my mind. So I did what everybody does: go to FT rankings, look at the top 20 universities in the world, and be like, okay, which deadlines are open right now? The funny thing is, I did not even know about INSEAD before that. I was like, what is this French school doing on this ranking? And and I was interestingly, I was about to move. I was about to go to the MIT boot camp at that point of time, and I had started thinking about potential future avenues because I was in a cash burn situation, and I went there. I applied to INSEAD. It was literally on the day of the deadline. The closing time was, I think, 4:30 a.m. India time or 3:30 a.m. India time, and I finished my application and my essays at like 2 a.m. at night, and I submitted my application. So it was final round, literally the final minutes, but but the idea came from wanting to get a skill set, wanting to get a network, and wanting to get exposure and learn from others. Because the difference between going to a B school versus learning from YouTube or learning from a Coursera course is that you not only learn from the instructor, but you learn from the lived experiences of everybody around you. And that was a crucial thing for me, like understanding what are the mistakes that people made, why did my startup fail. All of those things were key questions that I wanted to get answered.
Got it. So your application journey itself is extremely unique. So, how did the INSEAD experience surprise you, given the expectations that you had?
I mean, it was a pleasant surprise. The first day that, so I went for the Business Foundations course. So I kind of ended up at INSEAD a little bit earlier, which was December. I land in this place in the middle of the forest where nobody speaks English, uh, but they baked good food. I mean, there were good desserts and there was good bread, and I was like, okay, I can live with this. Um, but it was really, and I remember it. There was a few professors, and Professor Astrid was our finance professor for the Business Foundations, and I remember going into that class, and it was like, wow, this is on a whole different level of understanding how to teach. Like, it wasn't about what she was teaching, it's about how she was teaching. um, and I really thought that was like quite transformational from the way that I thought about learning in India. um, like you're just supposed to follow a set of instructions, and thankfully it's changing back in India as well now, with some uh, universities making a shift in the teaching paradigm. But that was like key for me. It was like wow. And then we went to a few places. Like we went to there's a bar called Glasgow uh, in Fontainebleau, ironically. But we used to go to the Glasgow, and we used to kind of sit down and like discuss the homework from that day. Um, and that was like a very easy sort of into the whole INSEAD ecosystem. I stayed back in Paris till the day it officially started. And like the day everybody started arriving, because I'd already taken my house in Fontaine. It was amazing. I was staying in a house with like 10 other people, uh, like about 6 different countries in my house itself, 3 different continents. And that is what INSEAD was about. Like it was just a melting pot of all these cultures, perspectives, and lived experiences, and experiences to be lived. So it was the future as well as the past coming together.
That's fantastic. So, with INSEAD, obviously your journey was quite amazing. But post INSEAD, Microsoft happened. In fact, you got to work with Microsoft's two very big offices, one in London and the other in US. In Microsoft, you are working on the tech side of healthcare, and you have a very interesting passion towards women healthcare in particular. So, how did you figure out your niche in a giant sector like healthcare? This is especially important because more and more our peers are talking about this. So, I think this could be quite helpful for them.
So I think there's a couple of things. Getting to Microsoft was surreal because during my grad trip, I did not have an offer from Microsoft. So I'll just be completely honest. I wasn't going to join Microsoft on the day of my graduation. It was after that I got an offer, which was in January. But I took it because I knew the size and scale of the impact that you can drive in a company like this. Especially after like Satya had just become the CEO, I was like, okay, this looks promising. Let's see how this goes. Um, Women's health is something that has been close to my heart. I mean, um 50, 51% of the entire world is women. So it should be something that is a mainstream. And to kind of even think that you have to talk about it is sad in today's world, but it is. Um, and one of the core things that I found out was the intergenerational transfer of disadvantage um happens starts with the antenatal care. Uh, and the health of a woman is directly proportional to the health of the community in rural India. And there's been a lot of studies done around this. Like the University of Liverpool has done this. Professor Ian Buchan, who's the executive dean of the university, there has published a few findings. So it's a global phenomena. Like the health of the women, specifically during their prenatal and postnatal phases, uh, is key to determine the societal disadvantages that the child might face because. Poor antenatal health will lead to poor sort of child development, will lead to poor learning, which would make it harder for them to sort of be successful in later stage of life. The other thing is in rural India, again, the women ran the house. It was quite important for the person who was running the house to really be okay and be at the top of the health. The third thing is there is an asymmetric amount of information around men's health versus women's health. Like even in drug trials, you don't really see a parity because you will miss out on a lot of information for women and women representation. And then it gets even like worse when you look at the intersectionalities uh, with different sort of racial biases that the data has. Now, this brings me to another ecosystem that I'm working in, which is artificial intelligence. AI or machine learning, whatever you want to call it, depends on that data. There's three interesting things coming together: the lack of women's data, AI depending on that data, and the conversations around privacy. So people have stopped giving their data like now. Uh, Add to that, when you start a business, you look at the low hanging fruit. Now, if I'm a startup that's trying to kind of have an impact on the society, I will look for the low hanging fruit. What's the low hanging fruit? It's the typical male data set, highly skewed, that you'll find there. Now, I have $100,000 to invest. I will take that money and I will build the machine learning model because I don't have to do data gathering there. It's already built out, which means that systemically I am leaving the women out for every innovation that I'm doing, which is why this conversation becomes a lot more important. When you look at societal problems, you have to think beyond the low hanging fruit. You have to think for the people who are at the most disadvantaged and how your technology is going to affect them. And that is why I keep talking about women's health a lot, because systemically, by going after the low hanging fruit, by saying, oh yeah, let's just ship something and make it happen, the startup ecosystem is slightly biased. I wouldn't say it's completely, because a lot of people have brought on board people with a background in SDS, people who understand this sort of conundrum. And they're building privacy preserving technology to allow more people to share their data and information. But we are not there yet. And we still need to go a far way, like a significant amount of way to get anywhere close to parity.
I very recently read an article. This is completely different from healthcare, but just to specify the gender disparity around AI. The face recognition softwares that a lot of phones now have, where they can systematically decide that based on your photo, who is that particular person. Most of these softwares, because they don't have enough data on women, they tend to slot similar looking women as one, versus the chances of accuracy for men is way more. So something as simple as a face recognition system on photos for AI, if that is skewed, I totally understand where you're coming from with respect to healthcare and every other aspect that we get disadvantaged. So apart from the fact that this is obviously of a personal agenda to me, kudos to you that you are talking about it. In fact, the last time we spoke, you also mentioned certain books. It would be wonderful if you could talk about those books as well that have helped you gain more knowledge and interest about this sector.
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful books for me has been Design Justice, and it talks about the way you approach problems. It's not about solving problems; it's about the approach, and how you need to think through a lot of these problems that we face around intersectionality. I mean, of course, there's a book by I forget the author, Emma Barrett, but there's a book called Period, which talks about menstruation and makes it real. I mean, I've also had the personal pleasure of knowing people who have made periods mainstream. So Valentina, who runs a startup called Day Tampons, she used to go and pitch to VCs about menstruation, and it used to be this like really taboo subject that nobody wanted to broach. And it's like, well, you can have Viagra as a mainstream, but you can't like talk about periods, and that's a problem. Uh, Also, like women's health has been clustered into like things like oh, breast cancer research. Of course, we are doing women's health, or period tracking. Of course, we are doing women's health. But people don't understand the nuances that even simple things like asthma might have a complete different sort of play. So things that are common to men and women, that's the place where we need to work the most, because in breast cancer research, guess what? Thankfully, we are skewed towards the women who get the mammograms done. So it's a massive ecosystem that is now thankfully getting mainstream. And I think Design Justice and Period are two of the most important books that changed the way that I thought about certain things. Also, there's the book by Melinda Gates. I'm missing out on the name, blanking out on the name right now, but she's written a book, and it is The Moment of Lift. It is an absolute amazing book. It gives you so many data points. She's thought through about why is it important. She goes across like India, Africa, US, everywhere, and you find those patterns, and it makes you. I mean, it fires you up, but it also makes you sad at the same time. So it's like this duality where you're like, oh my God, there needs to be so much work that needs to get done. But yeah.
So thank you everyone for joining in for the first part of our candid conversation with Siddharth. Please and subscribe to our like this video and subscribe to our channel, and also share this video with whoever you think will benefit from this. And we'll be back with part 2 next Friday.